Check 1 2. Check 1. One two. Check 1 2. Mic check 1 2. Check 1 2. It's almost there. They're gone. Napata feedback mbaya sana ndio. Check 1 2. Mic check 1 2. Check 1 2. Check 1 2. Check. Check 1 2. Check 1 2. one, two. Mic check, one, two. Check, 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 one, two, two, two. Check, 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 one, two. Check, check, one, two. Check, one, two. Check, one, two. Check, one, two. You can change board. Check 1 2. Check 1 2. I can't do anything about it now.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen of the press. Warm welcome to you again here on the second day of the United Nations Environment Assembly. Delighted to be with you here today, along with a very distinguished panel to discuss actions on air quality. Clearly, with 7 million deaths attributed, premature deaths attributed each year to air pollution, we have a global public health emergency. We have 2 reports today and a panel to discuss them. Actions on air quality is the first report with a global view, and a review of air pollution control in Beijing, 1998 to 2013, with a view on lessons learned and actions coming out of China, looking both at some of the positive indications, the political will, the actions that are being taken on this issue, and of course, the urgent nature of a challenge that continues to need concerted action and attention. Let me begin our panel by welcoming our Executive Director, Undersecretary General of the United Nations, Achim Steiner.
Thank you very much, Nathan. Again, welcome to our distinguished panel here. My task this lunchtime is basically to open the curtain, because you have 2 of the world's most active nations represented on the panel here that are addressing the issues of air quality. You also have my colleague Rob de Jong, who leads within UNEP work that particularly looks at the transport sector, which is a significant part of air quality, but we also are presenting to you today this Actions on Air Quality report. And I want to commend all those who have contributed to it. It's in one form a very short summary, but it's probably the best journalist's guide to understanding the issues of air quality, both in terms of their magnitude, but also in terms of what is actually being done about it. And our message to you today is that wherever you live on this planet, air quality remains something that needs our attention, locally, nationally, in every country and collectively across the globe. UNEP's role, as I pointed out to you, is not to work in isolation on this issue, but in fact, as the Ministers of Environment are meeting here under the auspices of the United Nations Environment Assembly, the world's health ministers are meeting in Geneva under the auspices of the World Health Assembly, and we have worked in very close coordination so that this week, from 2 of the principal portfolios in government, actually countries are working on a synchronized approach that tries to further elevate, first of all, the level of attention that is given to this issue, and secondly, to accelerate measures and to hopefully assist at the national level citizens, but also governments, and ultimately the economy and nations as a whole to address this issue. Very briefly, UNEP has for many, many years been at the forefront of trying to both understand and help countries and the international community to get an understanding of the levels of pollution, their impacts on the environment, and biological connection also on humans. Our work is to continue to promote, particularly in the developing world, the capacity for enhancing the capacity for monitoring air quality. It may surprise you, and the World Health Organization again outlined this, that for many cities, people don't even know what the air quality is because there is no infrastructure, no equipment to regularly measure air quality. So even when the WHO presented its report just a few days ago, it made a specific reference to basically what we know about places where air quality is being measured. One of our ambitions in UNEP has been to try and lower the threshold, both in terms of technology access and also cost, to allow communities, national authorities, local authorities to have a far more accessible means of monitoring air quality. And here in the city of Nairobi, as we speak, we are having 7 of these air quality monitoring devices that we have developed with scientists and technology companies from across the world, being tested because ideally, if they prove to deliver what we hope, then we may have succeeded in bringing the cost out of installing a simple air quality monitoring device. Well, they're not that simple because they monitor a series of pollutants from perhaps around $100,000 to perhaps somewhere below $2,000 per device. These devices can be connected through GPS and also our modern data infrastructure to continuously also deliver air quality monitoring data, and would allow a city like Nairobi or New York or Beijing to have a continuous ability to monitor in many locations the quality of air. But UNEP also works, and that is why Rob de Jong is also on this podium, for instance, in a sector such as transport. The mobility of people, of goods, is fundamental to our economies, to our communities. We have been working for many years with now over 70 countries to promote clean transport, and are also trying to stay on the front line of the technology curve. For instance, electric mobility is now become a part of UNEP's linking the environmental challenge of pollution and air quality to the opportunity of new technology and mobility. And Rob will speak to that in a moment. And finally, we also work with countries in the global context, for instance, on the Climate and Clean Air Coalition, which now encompasses, I think, close to 100 countries and international organizations, scientific bodies that are addressing a number of the short-lived climate pollutants, amongst them also black carbon, which again is a central part of the air quality challenge we face in many cities around the world. So thank you again for being here, and thank you to our panelists. And with these introductory remarks, welcome to the next chapter in reclaiming our air to be something that people can breathe without becoming sick. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Steiner. The UNEP Air Quality Monitoring Unit that Mr. Steiner referred to, I'm pleased to tell you, is now running live. There's a demonstration of it upstairs. So at your leisure, you're most welcome to go to the exhibit hall and take a look at how it works for yourselves as well. Let me now welcome Rob de Jong, head of our transport unit, for his presentation.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Nysen. So, my role is to take a quick overview of where we are worldwide in taking action on air quality. Let me first repeat what Mr. Stein already referred to, the latest WHO data that are sobering, that air pollution kills between 7 and 8 million people prematurely. They already said that just before UNEA 1, and as a response, the UNEA then adopted an air quality resolution, the first one ever in the history of UNEP. And just a week ago, we got an update. And that update says that the situation is not improving, but actually it's deteriorating. Air pollution has become worse 8% in just 5 years' time. And they also stated that 80% of the people living in cities around the world of bigger than 100,000 breathe air outside of their standards. And if we look at their recent data, and you see here a number of cities, and we look at the small particulates, which is a key, if not the most important, air pollutant, and you see the WHO guideline, which is 20, you see that 2 or 3 countries here meet that standard, and many cities still have a lot of work to be done. And by the way, these are not even the worst ones, because they found cities going up to 600. So I think it's clear we can talk about the fact that we have a serious problem at hand that is getting worse. So the question that we asked in UNEP, and the question that was asked from us in the resolution adopted at the first United Nations Environment Assembly, is to take stock of what countries, what the global community around the world is doing to address this issue. What we did is we worked with the governments, and we developed a process with them where we took stock of the actions they are taking. So we developed 193 country reports From that, we developed 14 sub-regional reports, thick reports, summarizing what's going on in the regions. And from that, we developed one global summary, which is this. So it's very small, and you think it's small, but this is 2 years of work. So what does that global summary tell us? We looked at key actions, and there could be more. There could be 20 key actions. There could be more. But we just took 10 actions that we think should be part and parcel of everybody's air quality menu. This is the summary that you can find on page 1 of this little booklet. And this summary shows, against the 10 key actions in 6 categories: indoor, fuels and vehicles, public transport, industry, waste burning, and the institutional setting in overall environmental and air quality laws. And it takes stock of countries. There are 193 member states on the bottom. It takes stock of where are we at the global level. And the green countries, the group of countries that are green, have achieved the level where they really, countrywide, in an active way, are addressing that issue to promote better air quality. The orange group is on the way. They've got the measures in place, and they're working towards implementation, and they're getting there. However, the red group still has not adopted key measures, key countrywide policies that will address these issues. So if we look at this picture, it is actually shows that a lot of work still needs to be done. It also explains, in my opinion, why it is that air pollution is still decreasing. Why it is that we see almost a 10% increase of pollution in 5-6 years. Because the global action addressing that issue is not yet up to speed to be able to address that increasing problem. So let me quickly take a few examples. I don't want to take too much time, but if you look at indoor air quality, we're doing very well. 70% of the countries really have active programs countrywide that are looking at improving indoor air quality. For example, bringing good cook stoves. The Global Alliance is a major driver there. And for example, we see the Seychelles Islands completely taking away all cook stoves and replacing it with LPG cooking. Done. So good stories there, good progress there. Fuels and vehicles is not so good. It's not so bad, it's not so good, but you see there's still a lot of red there. But the encouraging news is we have leaders, and we have leaders in every region. Here in East Africa, only a few years ago, Mr. Steiner was always complaining about these belching cars and if I could do something about it. And now, here in East Africa, the ministers together said enough is enough, and they went to a few clean fuel standards that is the same as the United States of America or Europe. And it didn't cost them anything. The question is, what's the rest of Africa doing? Norway, the same. 1 out of 3 cars being added to Norway today is electric car. Zero emission car. The future where we're going. So, where there is a mixed picture, there are also success stories. And those success stories are not only in the Norways, they're also in Asia Pacific, they're also in Africa, they're also in Latin America. We have leaders everywhere. A third example, waste burning. Increasingly we think that waste burning is one of the most serious issues when it comes to urban air pollution. And we find that very few countries have real effective regulations that strictly regulate either agricultural waste burning or municipal waste burning. There may be some more than the green one that we have here that have actually policies, but there are many exemptions, many let's close our eyes, and there's a lot of burning, not only in developing countries, also in developed countries. So you can see it there. There are many more examples in the report or on the website. I won't go and take your time to give you more examples, but there's a lot of information in the report and even more in those 193 country reports and 14 regional reports. So before I close, I just want to also give some good examples of what we in UNEP are doing about this. So 2 years ago, we got a resolution that says, first and foremost, countries take more action. And second, UNEP do a little bit more and take more action. I'll give you a few examples we've done. We've really started increasing UNEP's response to working with governments and supporting governments, working with civil society, working with the scientific community to start addressing air quality. Mr. Steiner referred to the air quality monitoring program that we now are supporting, and there's literally countries lining up to join that program to have affordable air quality monitoring. I think we should also give some credit to our regional offices. Our regional offices often play a leading role within all of the regions in bringing together governments, bringing together partners, but also providing secretariats for initiatives to improve air quality. In the area of transportation, we're supporting maybe 80, 90 countries at any moment, reducing their emissions, and just introduced a new global electric mobility program, and there's a stand upstairs with details there on that. I think in the area of assessment, we also did a lot of work at all levels, and we're going to hear from Beijing an example where we've assessed major progress. In the same 5 years that the WHO said air quality has gone down 8% between 2008 and 2013, Beijing managed to reduce it between 50 and 70%. So it is possible to break the trend of the WHO. That's the signal definitely we want to give. At the international cooperation, I think we are hosting the leading global air quality program, which is the Climate and Clean Air Coalition in UNEP, and out of 11 initiatives, 9 see UNEP involvement, and sometimes very active involvement. So I think altogether, UNEP has really stand up to the demand of the governments to increase its work on air quality, with a lot of work still to be done. So if I may conclude, I think WHO put it very clearly. There's a global and increasing pandemic, 7 to 8 million, and it's going 10% every 5, 6, 7 years increase. We found that with this report that the global response is not yet up to speed to turn that increase into a decrease. But we also found, and thus air pollution is getting worse, as WHO just established 1 week ago. But we also found that in every region and in every area or substantive area included in this report, there are countries that are leading in all regions of the world. So this is not rocket science. This is putting in place policy responses that can be done by all countries. And I think the examples included in this shows that those examples are there, and if we upskill them and replicate them, I'm quite sure we can reduce those impacts from air quality significantly. This is where you can find this report in electronic format. Also, the infographics in there, you can download them from here if you want to use them. You will also find the regional reports, the country reports, and also methodology notes how we did this. We worked with a group of top experts to qualify this work. You can find it on this website if you want more information. Thank you.
Rob, thank you very much. One of the other actions that UNEP is taking in partnership with the Climate and Clean Air Coalition, and I see Helena in the room, teaming up with Art of Change 21, is today we're launching a mobile app, a social mobilization art initiative called maskbook.org, or Maskbook, and the website is maskbook.org. Feel free to download it. It's a really fun way to sort of raise awareness about the issues around pollution, create your own mask, contribute to a very large global art initiative, awareness-raising initiative. At this point, let me now have the privilege to welcome Daniel Riefsnyder, Deputy Assistant Secretary for Environment of the United States Department of State.
Thank you, and good afternoon. It's really a pleasure to be here at UNEP and help in hosting this press conference. We thank UNEP for that, and we thank Achim Steiner for the introduction and Mr. de Jong for his overview of the report's findings. Air pollution is a growing threat to human health and the environment, and addressing this threat is a priority for the United States. Updated air pollution data released by WHO, as you've heard earlier this month, indicates that air quality is worsening in urban areas across the globe, and the 2014 WHO report indicated that outdoor and indoor air pollution together accounted for approximately 7 million deaths worldwide in 2012. For that reason, we were thrilled when countries adopted a resolution on air quality at the first UN Environment Assembly 2 years ago. Committing all of us to do more to address air pollution and requesting UNEP to assist them in that effort. We believe that UNEP is ideally positioned to fill a critical need with such assistance, and we've had a very good and close relationship with UNEP in helping to set up and establish the Climate and Clean Air Coalition, which both Achim Steiner and Rob de Jong have mentioned already, that has just taken off with over 100 countries now actively engaged. We'd like to offer our sincere thanks to UNEP for its excellent work since UNEA 1 to begin implementation of the air quality resolution, including its preparation of the reports that we are here to discuss today. This overview of key areas for national policy action to improve air quality, as well as the detailed online database of national policies that accompanies the report, are important tools to help countries identify actions to reduce air pollution effectively that are appropriate in their national circumstances. And the strength of this report, I think, in our view, is that it gives all of us an idea of where action is being taken and where it's not being taken. It's not an effort to name and shame. It's an effort to help us find ways and areas where we can improve and we can work together. So I think it's a very positive outcome. As the report notes, laws and regulations to implement and facilitate enforcement of national policies are important. In our contribution to this report, the United States highlighted the Clean Air Act, which was amended in 1970 to create the basic structure of our air pollution regulatory framework, and which underwent significant amendments both in 1977 and in 1990. The Clean Air Act in the United States requires the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency regularly to review the latest science and establish national ambient air quality standards to protect public health and the environment. U.S. states then adopt enforceable plans to achieve those standards. The law also requires reducing air pollution, including hazardous air pollutants and greenhouse gases from numerous industries and mobile sources. Since the law was adopted in 1970, U.S. air quality has improved dramatically. Total emissions of the 6 principal air pollutants dropped by 69% between 1970 and 2014. And since 1990, emissions of hazardous air pollutants have been reduced by over 60%. So we had these problems, and we've been addressing them, I think, very effectively in the United States. Because of these gains, we're now preventing 160,000 early deaths per year, averting hundreds of thousands of cases of asthma and bronchitis, and avoiding millions of lost work and school days. And our experience shows that it is possible to decrease air pollution while growing our economy. Between 1970 and 2014, the U.S. gross domestic product increased by 238%, all at the same time. So once again, thank you for being here today with UNEP. We celebrate this report, and we are very much appreciative of the action that UNEP has moved resolutely to take since the resolution that was adopted in 2014. Thank you.
Mr. Reef Snyder, thank you very much. Let me now turn right away to Professor He Kebin, Dean and Professor of the School of Environment at Tsinghua University, to tell us more about the second report.
Thank you. I think everybody understands the importance for the air quality improvement. Now the key question is how can we do that, especially in the developing world, especially for the countries with the rapid growth of the economy, with the rapid process of the industrialization, urbanization, and motorization. I think this report from the UNEP is trying to show one of the example or the best practice in Beijing for the last 15 years. There is some we can do, and also it's successful. So the most important things, we have confidence to do that. So they have a review of the air pollution control in Beijing for the last 15 years. And this report, I think I should say, actually the air pollution control is not the easy job, especially for the developing country. Here in Beijing, we can see for the last 15 years, they have a rapid economy growth rate. For the GDP growth rate is increased by 720% for the 15 years. The population is a 70% increase, and the vehicle population increases 300%, and also 77% for the total energy consumption. So with the so rapid growth rate, you have to get in your air quality gradually better to solve this problem. So what happened in Beijing? So in this report, we have reviewed, actually in Beijing, they have taken a lot of action for the air pollution control. For the long-term ones, for the air pollution control measures, I think from last 15 years, it covers various of the fields. And also secondly, we have some major events for the successful temporary comprehensive air pollution control. Everybody know the 2008 Olympic Games and also the 2014 the APEC summit. So actually the short-term pollution control has gained a lot of experience, ideas or roadmap for your long-term strategy. So here for this report, actually there is a lot of actions. This report just focuses on three major aspects. The first one is for the energy structure optimization, especially for the coal-fired emission control. As you know, that is a very typical characteristics for China, the coal burning. Actually, for the global report, they also mentioned the non-solid fuels. And in China, it's a non-solid fossil fuel. So that is a very big task. We're still fighting with that today. And the second one, of course, is on-road transportation. It's on-road vehicle emission control. We have a lot of experience in Beijing. It's quite successful. And the third part, I think is also very important, is the enhancements of the air quality monitoring. So if you want to solve the problem, first you want to learn the problem. So the monitoring system is so important to understand what kind of problem you have and what is a seasonal variation, and when you have taken some action already, and what happened for the results. It's getting better or worse. You have to understand that. You cannot simply get the statistics, how many boilers we have doing that. But what about the air quality, the air concentration? That is a final result. So here we have some experience for Beijing. For the coal burning, actually Beijing has done a lot of working, and especially for the cleaner fuel, switch coal to natural gas or electricity, and also stringent emission standard. So today the boilers, the coal-fired power plants, their emission standard is already close, even equal to the natural gas power plants. It's almost the same level. And also the end-of-pipe emission control devices for the NOx, SOx, and particulates. Especially also has economy incentives. That is very important. So for the scrubber of the boiler, coal-fired boilers, they have some economy incentives for the industry. And the second one for the car emission or the transportation-related air pollution, actually we are emphasis on the comprehensive. We call it a vehicle, fuel, and road comprehensive system. You can use, focus on the engine technology, and also you have working for your fuel quality, and also you have to taking your transportation system, for example, for the public transportation system. So that is, you have to design, for three aspects. But for Beijing, actually, for the last 15 years, and the first several years, they are focused on the engine technology only. But finally, they were found, the comprehensive way that works better. So the last one is the air quality monitoring and the reporting system. We have in Beijing, they have an upgraded air quality monitoring system. Today in Beijing, only the national levels monitoring station is more than 35 monitoring from the 8 in 1998. Now it's 35 already. So they still continues increase. And also enhance the quality insurance, the QA/QC system. You have environment, you have the equipment there. How can you ensure your data is scientifically, believable, and they can have the supporting for the decision maker? That is so important. But the final results for the residents is the concentration. It's not only so you can just show how many actions we have done, but the residents just take care what's the result. That's the final results. That is the air concentration. So I think we can find, for the major pollutants, air pollutants, like the SO2, the NO2, PM, and the carbon monoxide, is gradually improved for the last 15 years. It's a continuous to that. So I think that especially for the carbon monoxide and SO2, it's already stably meets the national air quality standard. So that is a very difficult job because Beijing has it's a northern Chinese city. They have a heating system. They have a lot of coal burning, not only for the industrial but also for the small or middle scale boilers and even the household stove coal burning. So that is really not easy job. So we are not stopped. This report just talk about 2030. Actually, we are continuous to improve the air quality after 2030. So the Chinese government has just had the National Air Pollution Control Action Plan. So they required Beijing governments to reduce the PM 2.5 concentration by 25% within 5 years. So that is a very difficult job. But they have done a lot of a very good job. So for the first 2 years, they already have 12% improvement. So they have continued to do that. And we hope in the future, for example, 2030, to meet the current national air quality standards is also is a WHO, the phase 1 standards, 35 microgram per cubic meter. So finally, for the even longer term, they have to follow like say 25. I think China will continue to improve the air quality standards from 35 to 25 and 15. And now I know in US you are getting 12 already. So that is a long way to go. So, but anyway, I think we have confidence to do that. This report can share with all of us, all of you, and to getting the better job in the future for the air quality improvement. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor He. Ladies and gentlemen, the stars have aligned. Two sort of small miracles have occurred. We almost started on time, and we have about 20 minutes now, luxuriously, for questions and answers. So let me immediately open the floor. We have a mic. I'll take a bunch of questions at the same time, maybe 2 or 3. I see a hand here, and then gentleman over there in the back, and over here then third. And if you might just state your name and who you're working with. No, sorry, the gentleman behind was first, yeah.
Hi, it's Adam Vaughan here from The Guardian. I just wanted to ask on the vehicle standards, can we trust them anymore, given the good work the United States has done in finding out what VW are doing, and now the world has woken up to something that campaigners and others have been saying for years, that there's a huge gap between lab emissions and real-world emissions. So they're obviously a key plank in this, but can we trust them anymore? And second question is, have we taken our eye off the ball with the focus on climate change? Because often, obviously with coal, the answers are the same. But in Europe, for example, our push for diesel to cut carbon emissions is why we have a big problem with NOx. So did we make a mistake in our focus on climate change? And when I say we, I mean people like the UN and governments around the world.
Questions together, the gentleman in the back.
Thank you. My name is Ochieng Ogood. I work for SciDev. Mr. Steiner, you've talked about technology access and technology mobility, but I was just wondering, in the context of Africa, whether this is really possible. Do they really have to look for technology from the West instead of homegrown technology that would address the issues that they do face? But on the other hand, is Africa being a dumping ground for a lot of toxic wastes, like in West Africa, like off the coast of Somalia, that is really dangerous. And probably what can be done? Do we really have monitoring and also policing mechanisms that would ensure that air is kept clean?
Thank you. And let's take just the third question before turning back to the panel.
Hi, I'm Lavinia Karanja from K24 TV. My question is surrounding transport. Thousands of Nairobi residents are exposed to high levels, concentrated levels of air pollution from motor vehicles and congestion, this resulting to 90% of air pollution in Nairobi. So what possible suggestions do you have for sustainable mass transport systems that we can implement to combat air pollution and to decongest the city?
Thank you very much. Let me open it up to the panel for responses.
They're all pointing at me to start. You take the difficult ones first and we do the rest, is what they said. Thank you for those questions. I think they're very pertinent. First, the situation in Nairobi. Nairobi is a rapidly growing city. The number of vehicles in Nairobi are doubling every 7 to 8 years. You think Nairobi is congested? We'll talk again in 8 years. So the issue in Nairobi is not only making clean vehicles. What we need in Nairobi is an effective working mass transit system. All large cities in the world have an effective mass transit system. That, for example, would be a bus transit system on Thika Road that can transport hundreds of thousands of people, separate lane, a bus going in and out of the city rather than everybody being in a big traffic jam, polluting air. That is now being worked on. UNEP is helping this. It's too late. It should have been there, but it's being done. Dar es Salaam opened theirs 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago. But it's coming in Nairobi. But then we need to question is doing this in an integrated way. We can introduce a mass transit system, but are we making sure it's stopping where the people live? We can have an integrated transport system, but are we making sure that we then buy new buses that are also clean? The plans in Nairobi are to buy old technology, old Euro 3 diesel technology. Then the question is, can people safely drive there? Can women drive safely and get in these buses at night? Can people with walking and cycling get to the bus stations? So what we need is a comprehensive approach. I think the Professor talked already about a comprehensive approach to solve the solution. And Beijing and Nairobi are not different in that sense. So we need a comprehensive approach in Nairobi. Then the question about is technology, accessibility and for mobility, is it possible in Africa? The executive director opened the UNEA in an electric bus produced in Uganda. So I think that gives the answer. Yes, it is possible. Why not? I think there's major opportunities for leapfrogging. If everybody in Africa leapfrog to a mobile phone, I don't see why we cannot leapfrog to clean transportation. And in the way, create a lot of green jobs doing so. So, and definitely in UNEP we have programs trying to build local capacities for local clean transportation. Then the question on air pollution versus climate change, and did we sort of bet on the wrong horse by promoting diesel? I think that's a false position. By promoting diesel, we've saved massive amounts of climate emissions. What we need, though, is a future that combines the two. Clean diesel is possible. Not all diesel is dirty. Euro 6 clean diesel can be quite clean. The problem that we have are not with the technology. The problem that we have to do with enforcement. The problem that we have to do with regulation. So for me, it's not a technical issue. It's a policy issue. And that's where I think we've dropped the ball. And that's where the report shows in many countries we're not there yet. We're talking about some companies having provided false information. But we're also talking about many countries around the world that still have very, very poor fuel quality and vehicle standards. So the last question is, can we trust what we're being told? I think there are two dimensions to that question. The first dimension is the gap, and I think for me the most worrisome actually, the gap between what we test in the laboratory and what we find on the ground is increasing. And this is worrisome because we all report that our vehicles have become much more efficient. But much of that progress we lose because the difference between what the laboratory test says and what, for example, the US government finds on the ground, that gap is increasing. In other words, laboratory test results are increasingly unreliable or not reflective of the emissions of vehicles in the streets. This gap is very worrisome because it's eating away some of the progress that we are making, and it calls for better processes, better standards, for example, for testing in laboratory, and those are on development, but they're again late. The second point you ask is, still can we trust what we get from vehicle manufacturers? I would still think yes. We've seen the Volkswagen, we've seen the Mitsubishi, but the majority, I believe, are still in line with what is being asked from them. I need to be proven wrong, but UNEP works closely with civil society, works close with the oil industry, works closely with the vehicle industry. I can say there is a genuine interest to work together to reduce emissions, to reduce air pollution, also from those that produce vehicles and oils and the others.
Well, I'll just try to say a few things. I think what counts for people is what the conditions are like on the ground in the real world. I mean, it's nice to say you have these kinds of procedures in place and you have those kinds of things that you're doing, but you know, that's all good if it adds up to a real world change. So that's the first thing, and that's what we have to focus on, is what are the conditions for people in the real world. The second thing is, I don't think any of us can take air quality for granted. Certainly we've made huge gains in the United States, but we also routinely do. Every year, every 2 years, I have to take my car in for an inspection, an emissions inspection. We also have lanes for high-efficiency vehicles, but you know, we've found problems even with that kind of an approach, because there are now so many people who bought high-efficiency vehicles that the lanes are really crowded again. So what do? I mean, the problem is shifting even as we solve one problem, we find there are new problems that arise. So we can't take it for granted. We're actually changing those lanes now to have a pay-as-you-go, so that it will have an escalating fee, so that people can use these rapid lanes to get to the city, but in lieu of some of the other approaches that we've taken in the past. I think that the key is always this, to keep our eye on the emerging problems, because as my colleague from China said, what counts for people is what they see in their daily lives, and that's what we have to focus on, and those are shifting constantly.
Let me perhaps respond to this question. Africa, technology, mobility, but also cleaner mobility, cleaner energy. I have often felt that it is one of the great myths of the 20th century that Africa is the continent that always has to follow a generation later on technology. And this, I think, as Rob already alluded to, is a myth we have to challenge. One of the ironies that, you know, Africa's mobility is very much premised on public transport today, but the proportion of people who are traveling through public transport is declining as private mobility is essentially becoming a more prominent feature. So in some ways, as development progresses, unless there is the right public policy, for instance, mass public transit systems, the infrastructure is put in place. Now, that has a lot to do with, you know, political decision making. If you spend all your money on building more roads, widening roads, first of all, sooner or later you'll end up, as Dan described, back in the same phenomenon, because you will have more cars still coming into the same city center. But it is also something that speaks to an equity issue in transport. People who use roads are well-off people. The mass of the working population that has to make its way into Nairobi, Dar es Salaam, Lagos, wherever every day, is actually the vast majority. And they either have to walk on a mud track next to the paved $1 million road, because there is not even a pavement on which to allow people to walk safely. They have no cycling lanes, therefore the risk of cycling to work is a life-threatening risk in the road conditions. And above all, they don't have comfortable public transport. Now, in a city like Nairobi, the private sector, through matatus, provides an enormous service. But again, why do we not make, for instance, vehicles that carry more than 4 passengers have the privilege of moving through the fast lane and reserve a lane, for instance, in rush hour? Thika Highway is just one example of thousands in every corner of the world where we invest the vast amount that we have available for transport infrastructure in serving a minority. And then the incentives are not there. Also, when it comes to technology, not only have we the wonderful example of, a solar bus being built in Uganda, and I salute the pioneers who took this project on, because everybody would have told them, you can't do it, it will never work, and they persevered. And today we have the bus not only world famous, it is actually here and showing what can be done. But the second issue is beyond technology. What stops Africa from looking at, for instance, motorcycles? The Boda Boda revolution, if you want, in Kenya, which is essentially the motorcycle taxi driver, is a phenomenon of the last 8 to 10 years, because the price of motorcycles has come down so significantly that there is a mass explosion in the number of motorcycles. Now, this is fantastic for mobility for the poor. But what stops governments in Africa from saying, in the urban areas, we should actually have electric motorcycles? Because in China and Indonesia, it's not even technology from the West. Electric motorcycles are now being sold in their millions at the same cost as a normal two-stroke engine motorcycle. So again, price is not the obstacle here. It is simply that people are not, in a sense, familiar with their options, and governments are not acting fast enough to change the market for mobility. With a growing number of people in Africa who are moving from A to B, urbanization, electric mobility is Africa's next shortcut to a cleaner future. And as Rob said, if it can be done with 21st century mobile technology, why can it not be done with 20th century two-wheel mobile technology? That, I think, is where we are now working with governments across Africa to say, do you know what your opportunities are? If only you took 2 steps now rather than having to take 10 steps in 10 years' time to reverse another mobility approach. And just briefly on the waste issue, Africa is already experiencing many examples of being a dumping ground of the world. Now, this is criminal activity and, in a sense, cutting corners by international business. Let's be very clear, because there are already, for instance, international conventions such as the Basel Convention that actually is meant to regulate the sale of waste. But it is also a priority that African governments really have to put at the top of their agenda. Protecting your own people, protecting your own economy from dumping is the other half of the equation. We in the United Nations have helped countries to negotiate international protocols and agreements, but if there is no domestic legislation, then, for instance, the dumping of e-waste or of toxic chemicals becomes part of the shadowy economy of essentially taking advantage of very vulnerable national importation systems. And we don't need to remind ourselves of the instance of Probo Kuala, when the dumping of toxic substances was essentially against all international law and even domestic law. We have since then helped countries in West Africa to strengthen their national monitoring systems, their regulations, and also their ability to, for instance, at ports of entry, to be able to monitor what waste is being brought in. Because let's be clear, recycling as an industry can also create jobs, but if it is not regulated, then it becomes a toxic and dangerous dumping ground. Finally, let me also say that leadership in the world is being offered by Africa. Under the Climate Clean Air Coalition today, Nigeria is the international co-chair. It is leading work not only on cleaner cooking technology and, for example, addressing the issue of brick, what do we call them? Kilns, brick kilns, which are a very polluting form of creating the building materials of the poor. But very simple technology can drastically reduce pollution from brick kilns. And Nigeria is also co-leading the effort on gas flaring, one of the more ridiculous phenomena of the 20th century, where essentially gas that is potentially a resource is somehow too expensive to capture and therefore is flared off. That's why you see in the great oil-producing regions of the world, when you fly at night, the landscape lit up not by lighting very often. For instance, in Nigeria, over 75% of the population don't have access to electricity. But the gas flaring can be seen at virtually every processing plant for oil. So there you are. We are correcting some of the, let's say, stranger phenomena of our 20th century economy.
So when we talk about the sectors like the transportation sector, if you want to take care of both the air quality and the low carbon like climate concern, so I think we have separate in the two categories. It's so for the near term, you have to follow the better technology, engine technology. So for example, in Beijing, they're already equal to Euro 5, and now it's under discussing the Euro 6. But for the potential of the reduction for carbon and even the conventional air pollutants, so how about beyond the Euro 6? So you have to thinking about the new technology, like electricity, advanced, the so-called advanced vehicle technology, including electrical vehicle. But the transportation is not only urban transportation. When you talk about, China has more and more city cluster. So you have to thinking about intercity transportation. That is a whole story. So for the intercity transportation, I think you have to thinking, it's an on-road, a diesel or a gasoline vehicle, or the real, like the high-speed train in China. Now it's more and more popular. So for example, between Beijing and Tianjin, if you just take a bus or the old type of train, it takes 2 hours or 1.5 hours. But for high-speed train, it's only 29 minutes. So for the emissions, efficiencies, I'm sure the new technology is much better. And also for the electricity, for the near, the long-term or middle-term future, what is the electricity comes from? For China, if it comes from coal burning, and it's high emissions from coal power plants. So now in China, why we have to doing is ultra-fuel emission standards for coal, and then you have to using the potential of the coal resource for the vehicle in the near future. So you can get in electricity. We have some quantitative analysis already to the government to see how about the energy, carbon efficiency, combustion efficiency, how about the SO2 control, NOx control, the PM control level, and then if you beyond that, and you get better to switch the fossil fuel to electricity. Otherwise, even getting worse. So I think the Chinese government already quite understand, for the short term and long term, we have a different strategy. But for long term, definitely for electricity. And then for the electricity, even you have to increase the non-fossil fuel electricity, like the new and renewable. So that is better for not only air quality, but also for low carbon emission. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. A very rich and complete set of responses from all the panelists, and I'm afraid I have to now bring the press conference to a close and release some of our panelists to their next engagements. Before I do that, and again, a warm thank you to you all. Perhaps if I can have you all, just for the cameras, stand with the two reports that are now launched. Please, please.
Can I just make one small remark, because I know we have many Kenyan journalists also here, and throughout the last weeks I've been asked, this is so interesting, UNEA, the whole world is meeting here, but how does UNEP make a difference to the Wananchi, the people who live in Kenya, who see UNEP here, the world headquarters of the environment? Let me just say to you as journalists, when you write and report on this, please share with our Kenyan brothers and sisters that every time that they will pass a petrol station now in Kenya, they can also in a little way think of UNEP, because every liter of fuel that is now being sold here is less dangerous for them and for their children. It's not that UNEP does this alone, but Rob and the team that has worked for a number of years with the East African governments, and this is true for Tanzania, for Rwanda, Uganda, this is how we make a difference to people's lives. We have helped governments to move from 10,000 parts per million of sulfur 9 years ago to now 50. East Africa has jumped in less than 3 years from the Stone Age of fossil fuel markets to world-class standard. This is UNEP at work, and it affects every single citizen here, even those who don't have a car and buy fuel, because they will suffer because of the emissions that they will inhale because of other people's cars. So I just wanted to mention that because I'm always looking for examples to make the link between what we do at the level of global assessments and science and how it changes people's lives. And here is, I think, a great example just of the last 2 years. So thank you very much.
Akim, if I could just add that we've found too that getting sulfur out of gasoline is key to then being able to use the most modern technologies for other kinds of air pollutants. So that's a very fundamental change.
Very true. Toyota and Mercedes and all the other manufacturers, for years I've been waiting to be able to change the vehicle fleet in UNEP to hybrid and cleaner fuel vehicles. The latest state-of-the-art technology engines are not authorized to be sold in Kenya. You cannot buy the best quality engine in a Mercedes, in a Toyota, in a Lexus, or in any other car, because the argument always was the fuel is too dirty here in Kenya. So your point is precisely now, and my appeal to the motor companies would be, okay, now the fuel is clean. Where are you in enabling African customers to buy state-of-the-art technology? Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you. Again, if I may welcome you all to stand with your report copies for the cameras. Oh, can the cameraman please step down just for the video cameras? We're okay, video? We need the cam.
Everybody, down.
Sorry guys, video wants us. Not very often that we get the world video on its knees, isn't it?
Excellent. Thank you all very, very much again.